Here's what nobody talks about. Your F-35 is invisible to radar. Your B-21 can punch through air defenses that would have been science fiction 30 years ago. You've got stealth, you've got precision, you've got 500-mile range missiles that can kill a ship before the crew even knows you're there. And none of it means a damn thing when the fuel gauge hits zero. The Pacific Ocean is 64 million square miles. There are no gas stations at 30,000 feet. And if the tanker doesn't show, the most expensive fighter in human history becomes a very elegant anchor. This is the story of the machine that keeps America's air power alive, the one that never makes the headlines, the one that flies straight toward the danger zone, completely unarmed, so everything else can do its job. This is the story of how America almost broke that machine and what it cost to fix it. The Pentagon calls it the air bridge. That's a clean bureaucratic name for something that is actually terrifying to watch up close. Picture this, two aircraft, both moving at roughly 300 miles per hour, separated by less than 50 feet. One of them has a rigid steel boom, a pipe, basically, that has to be threaded into a hole about the size of a basketball on a jet that's being buffeted by turbulence. The guy doing the threading, he used to lay face down on the floor of the tanker, stomach flat on the metal, staring through a tiny porthole window, manually working the boom by hand. That's not a war movie. That's Tuesday for the crews of the KC-135 Stratotanker. Without this machine, the Air Force doesn't project global power. It projects regional inconvenience. Strip away the tanker fleet, and suddenly America's reach anywhere in the world in ours doctrine becomes reach anywhere within a few hundred miles. That's not a superpower. That's a regional patrol force. The KC-135 has been holding that bridge together since hard 1957. That's not a typo, 1957. Today, young pilots are flying the same airframe their grandfathers flew over Vietnam, and that's where the problem starts. 1957. Eisenhower is in the White House. The Cold War is running hot. Boeing rolls out a machine designed to extend the reach of America's nuclear bombers deep into Soviet territory. Nobody in that room thought they were building something that would still be flying in the 2020s. Here's the thing about the KC-135 that the Air Force figured out pretty early. You don't throw away a platform that works, you fix it, you upgrade it, you squeeze every last hour out of it until the math stops making sense. And for a long time, the math made sense. The biggest upgrade, the one that basically gave the plane a second life, was the engine swap. Tossed the original J-57s and bolted on CFM56 turbofans, the same engines that power half the commercial jets you've flown on. The results were not subtle. Fuel capacity jumped 50%, fuel consumption dropped 25%, engine noise went from 126 decibels, that's standing next to a jet engine with no protection, down to 99. And the Air Force saved billions of dollars they would have spent on fuel and maintenance. That's the KC-135R, a smart, disciplined upgrade that extended a good machine's usefulness by decades. But metal doesn't forgive time, it just keeps its ledger. When you weld aluminum panels together in the 1950s, you're using the best techniques available at the time. But 40-50 years later, the gaps between those panels become highways for moisture, and moisture becomes corrosion. And corrosion eats through structural members you cannot see and cannot reach without tearing half the plane apart. The mechanics call it finding surprises. You go in to replace one bracket and you find 3 others that are compromised. You open a panel expecting to swap a fitting, and instead you're staring at corrosion that's eaten through load-bearing structure. There's a component on the KC-135 called the milk bottle pin. It's the connection point between the wing and the fuselage. The pin that literally holds the wing on. When corrosion hits that area, you don't just replace the pin, you freeze the entire aircraft on a scaffold, you strip out multiple structural assemblies, you spend hard 2,500 labor hours and $500,000 to replace one pin. One pin. The numbers tell the story. In the 1990s, a Stratotanker going through heavy maintenance was done in about 245 days. By the early 2000s, 400 days. The number of maintenance hours per cycle nearly doubled, from 16,000 hours to 36,000. The cost per aircraft for a major overhaul went from $2 million to $7 million. And after all that money and all those days, some variants were only mission-ready 71% of the time. That's not a maintenance program. That's a slow bleed. But here's what the budget numbers can't capture. March 12, 2026, Western Iraq, Operation Epic Fury, no enemy fire, no surface-to-air missiles, no hostile aircraft. Just two KC-135s, both performing a standard tactical refueling mission, colliding in the dark. 6 crew members, 6 families, none of them came home. You can call it pilot error. You can call it procedural failure. You can call it an accident. But here is what the KC-135 did not have that night: 3D cameras with depth perception, real-time spatial awareness systems, infrared sensors that turn darkness into daylight. It didn't have those things because it was designed before any of those things existed. Those crews didn't fail. The technology failed them. Bravery should never be a substitute for modern equipment. The KC-135 was a legend, but legends have a cost when you keep flying them past their time. By the late 1990s, the Air Force knew the clock was running out on the KC-135 fleet, so they did what the American defense establishment does. They wrote a contract. The plan was to replace about 100 of the oldest birds with the Boeing KC-767, clean, modern, capable. And to get around budget constraints, the Air Force cooked up a creative financing structure. Buy 80 outright, lease 20 more. Senator John McCain, who knew a bad deal when he saw one, called leasing military aircraft flat out irresponsible, a waste of public money. He wasn't wrong, but the program moved forward anyway. And then the whole thing exploded. December 2003, investigators uncovering something that made the procurement scandal look almost quaint. A senior Air Force official named Darlene Druyun, someone who had actual authority over the tanker contract, was simultaneously negotiating a job for herself and her family members at Boeing, while she was sitting across the table deciding whether Boeing got the contract. Think about what that means. While Air Force crews were flying 40-year-old airframes and betting their lives on aging metal, the people responsible for getting them new aircraft were using that process as a career move. The fallout was severe. Druyun got 9 months in federal prison. Boeing CFO Michael Sears got 4 months. CEO Philip Condit resigned. The company paid a $615 million settlement to make the fraud charges go away. And the tanker program, dead. The program restarted in 2007 under the name KCX, this time an open competition. Boeing's KC-767 Advance versus Northrop Grumman's KC-30, built around the Airbus A330. February 2008, Pentagon announces Northrop wins. Boeing files a protest. The Government Accountability Office investigates. They find serious flaws in how the Air Force evaluated the bids. The whole competition gets thrown out. September 2008, canceled again, waiting for a new administration. Finally, February 2011, Boeing wins with a design based on the 767. They call it the KC-46 Pegasus. But to win, Boeing signed a fixed-price contract. They locked in a number and promised to eat any cost overruns themselves. That decision will haunt them for the next decade. 10 years of litigation, protest, canceled contracts, restarts, 10 years during which the men and women keeping the KC-135s flying had to keep patching aging metal with aging tools. Corruption doesn't just steal money. It steals time, and in the defense business, stolen time gets paid back in blood. When Boeing signed that 2011 contract, they weren't just promising a new tanker. They were promising a completely different idea of what a tanker could be. On paper, the KC-46 Pegasus is extraordinary. It carries 212,000 pounds of fuel. It can move 18 standard cargo pallets, 3 times what the old bird could handle. And in a mass casualty scenario, a ground crew can convert the cargo bay into a flying trauma ward in 2 hours, 54 patients, medical oxygen piped directly into the walls, electrical systems pre-wired for life support. That's not a tanker, that's a flying hospital that also happens to carry enough fuel to keep a fighter wing airborne. And the refueling system, genuinely revolutionary. The boom operator doesn't lay on the floor anymore. They sit in a proper seat behind the pilots. In front of them, a bank of 3D screens fed by optical and infrared cameras mounted at the tail. They can see depth, they can see distance, they can work in complete darkness. The system is called RVS, Remote Vision System, and it's supposed to give them better situational awareness than ever before. On top of that, armor plating on the flight deck, electromagnetic pulse hardening, the LARCM system, laser-based missile countermeasures. The KC-46 is designed to survive at the edge of contested airspace. That's the brochure. Now here's what actually happened. The RVS cameras, the centerpiece of the whole system, had a serious problem with sunlight. At certain angles, certain lighting conditions, the screens would wash out, or the depth perception would distort. The operator would be looking at what appeared to be a clear picture, and the distances would be wrong. Now put yourself in that seat. You're trying to thread a steel boom into an F-35 that cost $100 million. Both aircraft are moving at 300 miles per hour. And your screen, the only thing you're using to judge distance, is giving you bad information. The Air Force classified it Category 1. That means this defect directly threatens aircraft and crew survival. Not a minor fix, not a software patch they could push overnight. Hard Category 1. Then came the boom itself. Boeing designed the KC-46's refueling boom to international standards. The receiver aircraft needs to apply about 400 pounds of forward thrust to maintain the connection during transfer. Perfectly reasonable. Matches the spec. One problem. The A-10 Warthog, the beloved ground attack aircraft that has been killing tanks and supporting troops for 50 years, is a slow, relatively light aircraft. It can only generate about 650 pounds of forward force. So when an A-10 tried to refuel from a KC-46, the boom pushed it backward. The most advanced tanker in American history could not fuel one of the most important aircraft in the inventory, because nobody checked the math against every receiver in the fleet. Pause, there was more. Cargo locks on the floor occasionally released mid-flight. Fuel was found seeping between internal barrier layers where no fuel should ever be. Each of these defects alone would be embarrassing. Together, they were catastrophic for Boeing's balance sheet. So remember that fixed-price contract? Boeing ate every single one of these fixes out of their own pocket. The losses piled up. $7 billion. Slow $7 billion. In losses from one
40
program, the camera upgrade RVS 2.0 won't be fully deployed until 2028. And while Boeing was rewriting camera algorithms and redesigning boom actuators, the crews flying KC-135s were still out there, still flying metal that first took to the sky before the internet, before GPS, before anyone in the Air Force had heard of a computer chip. They were paying the price in safety, in risk, in lives. The Middle East gave America a certain kind of war, relatively short distances, friendly bases nearby, tankers operating from airfields a few hundred miles from the action. It was hard and dangerous, but it was geographically manageable. The Pacific is a different problem entirely. The Indo-Pacific
15.3.
theater stretches across distances that break most assumptions about American air power.
Backing
The
slow.
distances involved aren't just challenging, they're potentially mission-ending for aircraft that don't have a tanker waiting at exactly the right point in the sky. Take the B-21 Raider, America's newest strategic bomber, the first stealth aircraft that can genuinely penetrate the kind of layered air defense systems that China has spent 30 years building. Here's its Achilles heel: it still needs fuel. And the moment a B-21 pulls up alongside a KC-46 to refuel, both aircraft are in that airspace together. The tanker has no stealth. It's enormous. It shows up on radar like a building flying at altitude. That connection, 12-15 minutes of physical contact at low relative speed, is a window. And modern long-range missiles don't need a big window. The real solution is a next-generation stealth tanker that could accompany the B-21 into contested airspace. The Air Force has a program for that, NGAS, Next Generation Air Refueling System, and it won't be operational until the mid-2030s at the earliest. So what do you do about the gap? What the Pentagon actually did was ruthlessly practical. They canceled the competition for a new tanker, they redirected funding away from future programs, and they committed to buying more KC-46s, raising the purchase target from 179 aircraft all the way to 263. That's not a celebration, that's a calculated bet. A tanker that works imperfectly but exists today beats a perfect tanker that's still on a drawing board when the shooting starts. That's not cynicism. That's how real military decisions get made when the stakes are actual war. And the Air Force isn't just accepting the KC-46 as a fuel truck, they're building it into something more dangerous. The KC-46 now carries the Advanced Battle Management System. It functions as a data relay node at the edge of the threat envelope. Stealth fighters that need to share targeting information without broadcasting can route that data through the tanker. It's not just delivering fuel, it's delivering connectivity, situational awareness. The nervous system of a strike package distributed across sky where the enemy can't take it all down at once. Think about what that means for a pilot who's been airborne for 8 hours, deep in a contested zone, with his electronic warfare systems fighting off jamming attempts. When the KC-46 shows up on radar, it's not just fuel. It's the only friendly voice left in that piece of sky. The KC-135 Stratotanker deserves what it earned. 6 decades, millions of gallons transferred, every major American air campaign since Korea supported by its crews. But the decision to keep flying it past its engineering limits, to keep pouring money into maintenance cycles that doubled then tripled in cost and time, that decision had a price tag that never showed up in the budget line. It showed up in the 6 portraits that appeared on a base bulletin board in March 2026. That's the real cost. The KC-46 came into the world badly, $7 billion in losses, camera systems that couldn't judge depth, a boom that couldn't fuel the A-10, a decade of contract fights and legal battles that preceded a single aircraft delivery. None of that gets erased. But here's what's also true. Every technology that failed during development, the 3D optics, the electromagnetic hardening, the battle management integration, every one of those failures happened on the ground, in tests before the aircraft went to war. That's what a functional defense acquisition system is supposed to do. Find the failures before they happen in combat. Boeing found them the expensive way. The Air Force paid for the weight and risk. The KC-135 crews paid in ways that can't be measured in dollars. But the KC-46 is here now. It's being upgraded, the cameras are getting fixed, the boom is being re-engineered, and 263 of them will eventually replace every aging Stratotanker still flying. When the B-21 Raider needs to fly 4,000 miles across the Pacific, hit a hardened target, and come home, there will be a Pegasus waiting at exactly the right coordinates. Not because the KC-46's history is clean, it isn't. Not because Boeing handled it well. They didn't. Not because the Pentagon managed the program with wisdom and discipline. They didn't always. Because at the end of the day, somebody has to hold the bridge. And in the Air Force, that somebody flies a tanker. The fighters get the movies. The tanker crews keep the lights on. They always have.